et donc toujours on devra chercher à approfondir nos liens et assurer qu'on travaille ensemble dans un marché de plus en plus compétitif à l'échelle mondiale. I think one of the things we demonstrated over the past 4 years was that even under a fairly protectionistic American administration, we were able to stand up for Canadian jobs and interests. We renegotiated our most important free trade agreement with NAFTA in a way that defended Canadian access to the U.S. market and continues to highlight Canadian interests, from our cultural exemptions to our auto sector, to a broad range of intellectual property protections that are really important for Canadians. We also stood up in a few different occasions to push back against unjust tariffs brought in by this current American president to defend our steel workers and our aluminum workers, and we will continue to be there to defend Canadian interests. But the fundamental argument that we made every step of the way over the past 4 years, and will continue to make into the future, is the fact that creating or imposing barriers on trade between Canada and the US not only hurts Canada, but also hurts workers and companies in the United States. The integration of our supply chains, the close collaboration and cooperation between businesses and people on both sides of the border means it's always better for us to have free-flowing goods and opportunities on both sides of the border as we work together to succeed in an increasingly competitive global market.
Prime Minister Tom Pettit, CBC. On the Pfizer vaccine, these initial successful results we're seeing, is that going to mean Canada is going to be ordering more of this particular vaccine? Can you talk about the timelines of how long it's going to take to get as much as we need? And also, just as my understanding is that this vaccine has to be stored at very low temperatures. I'm wondering what steps we're taking to store it and to distribute it.
We have a secure. Responsibility to make sure that Canadians are safe and are well served once vaccines start to arrive. Indeed, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine candidate has published some very promising results and seems to be moving forward quickly. We've secured already millions of doses of that vaccine candidate, and when it is safe to distribute, we will certainly be beginning distribution in Canada to high priority groups. That is most likely to happen in Q1 or in the first 3 months of 2021, but of course there is a lot of uncertainty involved in these processes. In regards to this particular vaccine candidate, indeed, it needs to be stored at about 75 below 0 Celsius in order to be kept stable. And therefore, the logistical distribution of this vaccine candidate will require some very careful cooperation with provinces and with supply chains in order to be able to get it out to Canadians on a priority basis. We are already working on those necessary logistical supports, but obviously compared to potential later vaccines that will be much more stable at room temperatures, the logistics on this first vaccine are likely to be more complex and slightly more limiting in terms of where we can get this candidate out to than some subsequent ones. But as you know, we're going to continue to work to be there for a broad range of, to help all Canadians with a broad range of candidates. Comme vous savez peut-être, le Canada est parmi un des pays qui a pu conclure le plus d'accords et qui a un portfolio d'exemplaires de ce vaccin-là et on s'attend à ce que ça arrive normalement dans les 3 premiers mois de 2021. Évidemment, on va commencer avec des populations prioritaires pour les vaccinations, mais on devrait en avoir de plus en plus au fil des mois, y compris avec d'autres potentiels candidats vaccins. Par rapport au vaccin Pfizer, effectivement, on doit le garder à moins 65 degrés Celsius pour qu'il reste stable et donc la distribution va amener quelques complexités logistiques qui vont devoir être assurés, mais nous sommes en train de travailler évidemment, si ça fonctionne, on va en acheter encore plus quand ce sera disponible. Par rapport à la nouvelle administration américaine, on sait que c'est une priorité pour bien des gens à travers le monde de continuer la lutte contre les changements climatiques tout en protégeant les emplois et en créant l'économie de l'avenir. Et les paroles et les intentions du président Biden là-dessus sont certainement du président élu Biden là-dessus sont certainement le bienvenu. I think people around the world know how important it is to move forward on fighting climate change and ensuring economic growth and jobs for people as we transform our energy mix and our economies. It is a welcome sign that the new president-elect has indicated that climate change is a top priority of his.
Prime Minister, there were multiple deaths this weekend at a Winnipeg care home. Police are investigating reports that people were laying dead for hours. You keep talking about a federal standard for long-term care, but there doesn't seem to be any action on this. Are you not partially responsible for the fact that this keeps happening in Canada?
We recognize the responsibilities that provinces have on long-term care issues. The Constitution designates that as a provincial responsibility, an area of provincial responsibility. But of course, the federal government is deeply concerned with the tragedies we've seen coming out of Winnipeg, with the tragedies we've seen come out of long-term care centers across this country, which is why we made the Army available in the early days of the pandemic in both Quebec and Ontario, while we've moved forward with the Canadian Red Cross to be there for installations and institutions in difficulties, and why we continue to work with the provinces and impress upon the provinces how it's important to share best practices and move towards a long-term care standards.
Minister Michael Couture with Global National. Over the last few years, you've had a pretty decent relationship with President Trump. He's still refused to concede and contest these election results. Have you called him? And more precisely, what's your message to President Trump as he continues this challenge?
My message to every American president is that I will work to defend Canadian interests. That's my job. My job is to make sure that we're working well with the current administration and that we will work well with the incoming administration. That's what Canadians expect.
Prime Minister Lee Berthium, Canadian Press. We've seen case counts for COVID climbing across the country and reaching record levels. You've continually called for Canadians to double down, including today. But do you think the provinces need to take stronger action? And at what point does the federal government step in? And if so, how?
The provinces have the responsibility for making local health decisions and determining what closes down and when. What the federal government does, and what the federal government has done from the very beginning, is made it easier for local health authorities to make the right decisions quickly by committing to be there to support people who lose their jobs because of the pandemic, people who are facing ultimately, the best way to protect the economy is by protecting Canadians' health and reducing the spread of COVID-19. Les provinces ont la responsabilité de choisir quoi fermer et comment rapidement ils vont agir, mais le gouvernement fédéral a compris que sa responsabilité, depuis les tout débuts, était d'être là pour faciliter cette décision pour les autorités locales, en garantissant que les Canadiens qui perdent leur emploi vont avoir de l'appui du gouvernement fédéral, en garantissant que des entreprises et des petites entreprises qui doivent fermer à cause de la COVID, partiellement ou complètement, vont avoir l'appui du gouvernement fédéral. On est là pour aider les autorités locales à prendre la bonne décision rapidement, qui n'est pas à choisir entre le bien-être économique des communautés et le bien-être en termes de santé et de COVID. C'est un enjeu qu'on va continuer de faire et même on a investi encore plus pour assurer que là où les autorités locales doivent fermer les entreprises, on va être là encore plus pour aider ces entreprises-là. Donc, puisque nous savons que la meilleure façon de protéger l'économie, la meilleure façon de protéger les entreprises à travers ce pays, c'est de réduire